Alright guys, so in the last video we set up the basics of our index page to build a front end of our application. We also went over a little bit of Angular, and the front end part of this is completely optional. We're actually done with the front end. We're never going to touch it again. And then the back end, we set up our requirements. We connected to the front end of the application, and we set up part of our basic of a Git call, and then we made sure everything was working. So the next thing that we want to do is really move on to the Mongoose side of things. Now, how do we do that? How do we get started with that? If we want to, and also, what we want to do is we want to set up a model. A model is basically going to be the structure of our document that we're going to create with MongoDB. The way that we can do that is we'll create a variable here, const, and we're going to set this equal to whatever we want to call it. In this case, it's going to be short URL, and in here we're going to require this file. Now, what's this file? It's basically the location models / short URL, and we're going to go ahead and create this file right now. And this will be basically this right here will be the, and let me control C out of here right now. It doesn't exist, so that's why we're getting an error. But what this is going to be is the structure of our documents. So let's go ahead and create another folder here. So we'll create a new folder. We'll call it models. And in here, we will have our short URL.js. This will be a JS document. And you'll notice how there's not a .js. As long as you're in a JS document in ES6, you don't need to put the .js. If I remember, or in a Node, it's either a Node document or a JavaScript document. I forget. But let's go ahead and create a new file. It's going to be that short URL.js. Now, what we're basically going to do here is first we need to require Mongoose. So, and I'll try to put some notes as we go here, is what this file is. It's going to be the template, the structure, the model, whatever you want to call it for our short URL document data structure. Next thing we want to do is we want to require Mongoose, which for some reason I have a tendency to type Moongoose. I could not tell you why. So let's go ahead and require Mongoose for here as well. Now, what we need to use for Mongoose is we need to create a schema. A schema is essentially our structure. So we're going to create a variable here, and this is going to be equal to mongoose.schema. This is what we're creating as our schema. I really think of it as the structure of the model, but it's the schema. And there's no need to create a primary key because Mongoose actually does that for you, so don't worry about that. Now, what we want to do is we actually want to create our schema. This is going to be our structure of things, and I call this URL schema, and this is going to be a new schema, and we're going to create our object here. This is going to be the rough way of what we expect from our structure of our documents, essentially our rows. If we were doing the structure of the tables in a SQL database, or imagine a JSON. This is how we, in a perfect world, how we want those JSONs to be formatted. We're going to have a key value here called original URL, and what is that going to be? It's going to be a string, and then we're going to have a shorter URL, which is going to be also going to be a string, and that's going to be the item that we're going to be returning. And then we're going to, after that, you'll see outside of that object, we're going to pass in a timestamps thing here as well. This is something I thought was pretty cool, where it will, when this item is created, timestamp it so that we know when it was created. So this is our entire document data structure, essentially. This is it, just two strings. Two strings. The last thing that we need to do is we have to go ahead and define a model class here, and we're going to set this equal to mongoose.model, and we're going to pass in the short URL right here. This is going to be the collection, essentially the table, and this is going, the URL schema is going to be the structure right here. So kind of like the table name and the structure, or in this case the collection and the schema. And then we're going to allow other things to use that as well. So we're going to module.exports is equal to our model class. So this is going to allow us to access this in our app.js, our node app.js. That's our entire schema for this. Not super complicated, but if you're new to Mongoose like I am, not very intuitive to get going. All right, so what do we do next? Well, the first thing that we should probably do before we move on is we should connect to our database. Now, one thing to note is that you'll see we have this short URL, and let's actually bring this up again. You'll see short URL right here. This is the name of the collection. However, when Mongoose creates that collection, it will actually pluralize it. So we'll add an S onto it because collections are, in theory, going to be plural. So we're going to do mongoose.connect. And this is going to be more Heroku stuff, but we're going to do process.env.mongodb_URI. This is basically, or let me just actually finish typing this out. MongoDB : in our case, this is our local version, which is going to be localhost / short URLs. So this is going to basically say connect to the database here locally or here on Heroku. So if we're not on Heroku, this isn't going to basically have a value. So we're going to go ahead and go here, which will be our local database. All right. We're making progress here, guys. The next thing that we should do while we're here is let's go ahead and actually launch our MongoDB. So wherever you have your MongoDB, go ahead and launch it. And there it goes. So it's launched. And then now that that's launched, go ahead and launch your node server. From my understanding, you typically want to launch your database before you launch your node server or everything. You may have kind of an issue. So you'll see everything is working here. And if you want to make sure that your Mongo connection is working fine, the easiest thing to do is to launch the editor and type show dbs, and you'll see you have this short URLs database here. You may not have that there. I have this here because I've already put stuff in the database. Don't worry about that. It's going to exist once there's something in it. So how we're going to do this to get going is we already have part of our creating a new one set up. We have the value right here, but what if the user puts in something that's incorrect? Well, we want to just test to make sure that it matches a regular expression, right? So I have this massively long regular expression that I got off of Stack Overflow. Shout out to them. So Regex for URL. So I'll leave that up on the screen for a second so you guys can pause it and copy it over if you'd like. But basically what this is going to do is it's going to get our regular, our HTTP regular expression so that we can test our string that we already have the value of right here. Now what we want to do is just have a if regex. Excuse me, I didn't store this regex. I actually, for some reason, this is one of those things where you go back and you review your code and you're like, ooh. So var rate, I set our expression, regular expression to expression here. So this is what I originally did. And I'm going to stick to it because I don't want to follow to it, but we should obviously probably just rename expression to regex and never do that again. But if we run into any issues, I want to make sure I can solve them quickly. without having to see what we did. So what we're going to do is we're going to test our string right here, which is URL to shorten. And if it passes, cool. Right now, all we want it to do is return console.log. Or actually, we want it to return works, else, and works isn't anything, so works, else, return fails. And we're going to test that right now on the front end. And if you didn't build a front end, all you got to do is remember this. So if we did this /new /test, so this should fail. Okay, so we're going to do a small variation to the code here. I actually found a little bug as I was doing it. I assumed that this evaluated true without having to put equal to true, but it does not. So what we want to do is just want to set this equal to true, and then we'll have a return statement. Return as well for when it fails. So let's go ahead and test that real quick. So let's say we go to test6.com. We should expect it to return failed. However, if we go back to HTTP or www.test6.com, whatever you want to do, it should go ahead and return that back because that's in the correct format. So our regular expression is working just fine. Sorry for the little bit of hiccups with this. Now, moving forward, what we want to do is we now want to add to the database. Before we do that, though, let's go ahead and create our short URL. The short URL is going to be pretty straightforward. This is going to basically just be a random number. Now, I just go up to, I create a variable called, and we only need to create it in this true statement because at this point we know the long URL passes the statement. So we're going to set this as math.floor because we want it to be a whole number. And then we want a random number, math.random, times, I did 100,000. And there's probably better ways. I turned this into a string, by the way, to string. So we're creating basically a whole number between 0 and 100,000. That's what we're doing right now. And we're setting it to a string. And that needs to be capitalized. And the next thing we have to do is now we have to remember we created that sort of data model called short URL. We're going to create a variable here called data. And this is going to be a new short URL. Think of it as an object because that's basically what we're creating here. And in here, we're going to have, these need to match the name of what you have set up in your in your string. So remember we have our original URL, which is what we're passing in, and we called it URL to shorten. So we'll just go ahead and pass that in there. URL to shorten. Probably could have named it just original URL and saved yourself a little bit of a headache. And then we're going to have shorter URL. Let me make sure that's what I called it. Did I call it shorter URL? I did. All right, shorter URL, and this is going to be just equal to the random number that we had right here. So this will be equal to our short. So now that we've created our object, our short URL, or rather we've created a potential document is probably a better way of putting it. We haven't done anything with it yet. We now need to save it to the database. And the way that we do that is we have our object here, and we basically just call save on it, .save, and then we want to pass in a little error callback function. And we're basically going to say if there is an error, so if error, we want to return res.send. And now, in all theory, there shouldn't be unless your database is down or something like that, because we've done some validation here and error saving to database. And then, so if there's an error, do that. So else it's just going to do what it does. So you could just, in theory, call data.save, but we're basically setting up a fallback here. Just make sure that there's no issues. And then we want to go ahead and just return our data object to see it. We want to see that everything's working. And before we move forward, let's go ahead and do that. So refresh this, close that, and we'll go to something like www.facebook.com, get short URL, and you'll see now the way that we know it's working, it's not just returning a random item, is it's actually generated this underscore ID, or the random primary key. We have our random whole number that we've created as well. Oh my god, I thought for a second I forgot to turn record back on. I was about to fucking throw my computer out the window, but alright, good. But we also have this whole data object here, and I don't think I want that now that I'm looking at it. So how do we fix that? I don't remember it doing that. I wonder if I set up something incorrectly, because my other project did not do that. We'll see if that comes to bite us in the ass shortly. So you know what? I don't think it will. I think I remember why. If error, one second, guys. I'm looking at the code here. All right, so we save it. Everything goes well. Then we make a return. Now, if it fails, the way I originally set it up was I just returned a new data object. In here, I return data again, but I re-instantiate what data is. Var data is equal to a new short URL. And then this doesn't actually ever get added to the database, but it's just kind of a way of showing the user what failed. And we'll pass in URL to shorten, and then we'll also pass in, for shorter URL, invalid URL. Save it, and right here we return data. All right, now let's save it, and let's make sure that our failure is working as well. We'll have I don't know, test 99, so this should fail, and we should get invalid URL. Oh, you know what? It doesn't actually get there. Test 99 doesn't get there. Did we misname the variable? It doesn't matter. We'll just throw something in here like URL just shorten does not match. I'll worry about that later. All right, cool. Match Regex standard format. All right, but we know that this is working. This is hitting, and it's returning something. Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to redirect the user through a different get call that happens when they have a short code like this. It's going to go and redirect them to their original URL. So let's go ahead and get started with that. All right, so let's get started. I did find where I was a little confused, where we passed in another object. In our res.json response, I accidentally wrapped our data here in a object. So that's why we're getting that additional brackets. But so this last little bit here of the video, if you've stuck with me thus far, thank you. I apologize if I've been making little hiccups along the way. It's just part of doing these things live. But the last thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to create another get call that will actually redirect us finally. So what we're going to do, we're going to do the get call with the short URL that we have, and then we're going to take that, we're going to query the database, our MongoDB database using Mongoose, to see, hey, does anything have this short URL? And if it does, redirect us to the original URL. And if it doesn't, too bad, so sad. Yeah. So I actually didn't put anything there if it doesn't. If it doesn't, it probably should return you to index.html. That'd probably be the better way of going about it now that I think about it. But you guys can code that on your own. That's not too hard. So our comment here: query database and forward to original URL. All right. So we know how to do a get call. So app.get. Pass in the parameter. In this case, is slash URL to forward. That's what I call it. And then we're going to have our callback function that takes in our request. It takes in our response. And it takes in the next. All right. So let's store our URL. So we call it var. Remember our ES6 here. Var short URL. And we're going to set this equal to rec.params.url to forward. Oh, excuse me, we don't need to. Actually, since I didn't name it the same thing and I want to follow my example. And this is something I will change in my future code. This will be the second thing that I've seen that I've done sort of bad habits. Which is one of the benefits of doing videos, is you find out where you are making mistakes along your code as well. All right, so we store the value in this shorter URL. And what we want to do is we want to call this function called find1. Now, find1 is a built-in Mongoose function that will allow us to pass in an object and see if it exists in the database. So we're going to call our database short URL. Don't get it confused with this shorter URL, which is bad naming convention. Short URL, all the way up top here, is our Mongoose collection, our structure, the whole deal. And we're saying find one value of this collection that takes in an object. And what is it that we're looking to find? We want to check the key value called shorter URL, which is, if you go into here, this right here, we're saying check this value, check this property, and compare it with this one right here. And again, another bad syntax is I could probably have just not done this and kept it as ES6 standards. And have a callback function here that takes in two things. One is an error, and the second one is the data, the return data, right? So first we want to go ahead and do a quick error message. If error, return res.send error reading database. So if there's an error, do that. If there is not an error, what we can do is redirect it. So one issue I had was that when redirecting, so the way that the Express redirect works is there's a function Express has that we can have our response, it's res.redirect, go to a certain URL. However, by default, it assumes that if it's not an HTTP with a // or HTTP // or HTTPS // URL. So let's say we put in www.codingtutorials360.com. It's actually going to think it's a folder structure that matches that. So what we need to do is we have to check to see if it has it. And then we have to change the string that we're going to redirect to. So that's what we're going to do right now. And this is all stuff that you would have seen if you worked through this horrible thing. So we're going to create a new regex. This is actually one of the most fun projects I've done in a while. So again, I am awful with regular expressions and things like that. I just Google them. But this is basically going to check if it's HTTP or HTTPS. So if I create a variable here as well called string to check, and we set this equal to data. And where are we getting this? The data that's in the database, right? This is our return data. And this find one only finds one of them. So the first one that it finds that it matches that, it returns that document, which is part of our short URL collection. Now we want to say, hey, check the original URL. This is the string we want to check, and we want to say if re.test. So if it matches str to check, go ahead and rest.redirect, and then we put in basically a status code here, and then we're going to redirect to data.original URL. Because we don't need to do anything with it. Else, if it doesn't, we want to redirect, but we have to concatenate the string with the HTTP. And I suppose you could get in some trouble here if they don't have an HTTP site, but I think by default everyone still has an HTTP site. Although, correct me in the comments down below if I'm wrong. Original URL, it will redirect us. And at this point, assuming, this is a big assumption, that we did everything correctly, let's go ahead and relaunch our server. Check to make sure everything's running. It is. Or that's our IDE, but it looks like everything's running here. Cool. Everything is working. Let's jump back into our application. Test everything out. And we'll go to something like www. One last shout out to the homie, thebestjs.com. And we're going to get a short URL. And here we have this right here. So it created our database entry. And now, if we did everything correctly and we go there, it should redirect us to thebestjs.com. And if you're wondering how someone who started MongoDB, Mongoose, and Node and Express 3 weeks ago was able to do this project, it was because of Stephen Mayu and his tutoring that he was able to provide me. So shout out to him, man. This project took me about 12 hours this weekend from start to finish with bugs, and I did some of it on live streams. But that is the URL Shortner Microservice from freecodecamp.com, part of their API and microservice. I had a great time doing it. I hope I did my best to kind of explain it as best as I could. Sorry about the little hiccups along the way. But as always, guys, if you're not already a member of our Facebook group, Code Tech and Caffeine, it's not really so much for the channel as it is a place for us all to share resources that I've started. I hope you join it. Just the link is in the description. And if you want to support me, you can at patreon.com/codingtutorials360. I hope this helped clear up any issues with MongoDB, Mongoose. I really like it. I like the NoSQL databases. It's very... I enjoy it. I enjoy it much more than I enjoy relational databases, but I'm just in the beginning. And technologies have a tendency to lure you in being easy and then are stupid hard. So who knows? But I'm really enjoying it. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye. Hey, guys. Thanks for watching the video. If you're interested in coding bootcamp, check out devmountain.com, where housing is included in your price of tuition. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and support me on Patreon. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.